We're here. We made it. We have a very special guest with us today, Karen Alexander. She comes to us from the great state of Pennsylvania. Karen, welcome to the Culture of Lafayette podcast show.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Always enjoy a conversation with you.
I've had such a pleasure of knowing Karen over the years. She is inspirational, dedicated, informative, diligent, and certainly a level up to ecosystems. Shall we begin?
Let's begin. And thank you.
Let's chop wood. Who's Karen Alexander?
Who is Karen Alexander? She is someone who is a striver. She works hard and doesn't stop. And she is someone who doesn't give up on her dreams and the promise of the future. She has been working in the XR space for about 5 years now and loves it, loves the people, loves the possibilities that this technology brings to enhance people's lives, to open up new creative possibilities, to improve processes for businesses and to make them more efficient, and to allow people to connect with one another from locations around the world.
Let's leap into XR. For our audience listening with us today, acronym meaning extended reality. But for many people within our industry, without the industry, and all the way around, have different interpretations on what extended reality actually is today. What is extended reality from Karen's lens perspective?
Right. I think of XR as a medium that is like video or many other media that allows us to accomplish things, to communicate ideas. And this one gives us some extra special powers, right? So that we can communicate in 3D forms, in spatial ways, in ways that provide information in our space, right there on top of the real world that we normally see. And I think it does open up new creative possibilities, which is important to me, and new opportunities for people to share things in new ways. And this means it can be used across all sorts of fields, all sorts of areas, right? So just like we use video for business training or for entertainment, or even to share a message with a loved one, those kinds of functions are still there for XR. It's just doing it in a more robust way.
How were you introduced to this space?
Well, actually, I became interested in XR through my study of feminist artists, and there were some who were playing with technology and with XR a bit. And I was also inspired by the famous Chris Milk video, VR is the ultimate empathy machine. And that, to be honest, was really what hooked me. And this was back in, I don't know, late 2015, early 2016. And at the time, I ended up making a complete life change. And I took off in the middle of 2016 on a 9,000-mile road trip. And I went to my first XR, although we weren't using the term then, but an immersive education conference in Denver, Colorado. And that was where I met Ethan Bach, who you and I will be speaking to later this month. And I really didn't stop from there. You know, I dove in headfirst and really got involved that way. And I want to mention another moment in history, but that was with the introduction of the video camera. It was back in the late 60s, early 70s. And that allowed women to tell their stories on their own terms and to tell the stories of other women because they were more affordable, they were portable, it could be operated by one person. So they didn't have to go through the studio systems that might have shut them out, right? And this, there was so much art created. It was not just art, but documentary film as well. But video became known as a woman's medium back in the day. And so when I got my first 360 camera, a little Samsung Gear 360, the original one, I was just looking to see if I have it on my desk, but I don't think I do. And started making my own videos. I felt very empowered by that and was taken back to that moment when a technological change made it possible for more people to tell these stories. So instead of these massive rigs for 360 video that cost tens of thousands of dollars, this little thing that you could, you could almost stick in your pocket, and you could go anywhere with it and tell your story and have people see from the perspective that you were seeing or that you wanted to see. So when I got to Pittsburgh in 2017, I decided to start a program called PGH in 360 Youth Perspectives. And I worked with community organizations who served youth to put these kids through 1 to 2 week boot camps to teach them how to make 360 video that expressed their perspectives on issues that matter to them. So this idea that VR could be an empathy machine, and that this new technology that was so impactful, it could share perspectives, that could be easily operated and people could learn how to use it, that was very empowering, I thought. So that was my motivation there. And also it could open up the door to new other technologies in the XR space. So that was sort of my inspiration there. And it was the change in technology that allowed something like 360 video to be accessible to consumers and relatively easy to use that inspired that. So that's where I started in this space.
Fascinating and intriguing on many levels. You mentioned feminism.
Yes.
Let's have it. Let's talk. Let's take it there. Let's go a little bit beneath the surface. The extended reality industry and tech itself, we now know there's data, and we see it with our own eyes, don't we, that we could do better, is what many say, both women and men alike, on our approach to greater and proper inclusion. Now, there's different variances and understandings on what this looks like for different cultures and different communities, and certainly in different sectors, even within the extended reality industry. From your perspective, being one of the leaders in our industry that's been visible out front and helping drive this technology on many different levels, what does it look like when we talk about feminism and the extension of reality itself for you?
Well, when we talk about the extension of reality as it currently stands, the sexism that is present in our world, has extended into the extended reality for sure. However, it does offer new creative possibilities, and that can help change the way that people think. But I know I work, as you know, I'm a community builder. That's part of who I am and part of what I do. And so I formed late last year a group called XR Women, along with Julie Smithson, Sophia Mashasha, and Sarah Klein. And we had our first meeting on the Immersive Learning Research Network campus in the Verbella platform in November of last year. And we're now here at October 8th, so almost a year. And we've been meeting every week since then, and have presenters, sometimes panels. We make field trips to other worlds sometime. We do take the odd break, quarterly breaks, but we are there to hear from other women about what they're doing in the XR space, so that we can celebrate what it is that they are doing, celebrate their successes, learn from one another, and also to come together so that we can collaborate and we have a community of support that grows in that space. And it really does feel like a community. And I think that's important. It's important to have that for those of us who, might feel sometimes like we can't speak up, or we might be mansplained. And we've actually just started a campaign that we launched on social media in the last couple of days, and it's called "Ready for Your Mantle." And it was my idea, but the implementation was done by others, so I don't want to take credit for all the work, but I was again inspired by feminists, and in particular the Guerrilla Girls, who were an artist collective, especially active in the 90s, but they're still around today. And they would protest the lack of inclusion of women in major museums and in art shows. So I took a picture of a group of us when we were on a Zoom meeting once, and I colored beards and mustaches on us all and said, okay, we're ready to be on your mantle. If you need another speaker, here we are, we're ready for you. So that hence the hashtag "Ready for Your Mantle." And if you look on LinkedIn and Twitter, you can find a nice picture of me with a mustache. And so we have noticed that there are many events where there are a lot of all male panels, and until there is a balance, that's not okay. Once we have a balance, fine, sure, we'll have all women panels, we'll have all men panels, and that's okay. But right now, events, even in the XR space, are dominated by men. But that's not to say that's the case for some of my friends who put on these things, and some people really do sincerely make an effort. But people can also come to us at XR Women. That's one of the things we do, is we can help you fill a spot on your mantle, because we've got women who are ready. They're ready.
Let's talk about that a little bit further. I'm a woman tonight listening to this podcast. I'm newly entered into this industry, this wide and growing industry, growing into the billions, growing into millions and millions of deployments happening in augmented reality and virtual reality, coming into new interfaces that are human eye resolution and so lifelike and compelling, migrating into education, into different spaces. What does it mean for me as a person from an enthusiast perspective, and as a woman, as a contributor, creating content, creating hardware, joining product delivery teams? What should I be aware of? What should I know that I may not know? What advice are you giving from me as someone that has navigated these waters quite some time?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say, don't be afraid of what you don't know. You can learn it, right? So if you are interested and haven't yet started, don't be intimidated. Everybody had to start somewhere, and we're all new to this. It's all pretty new. Yeah, there are a few people who've been doing it for decades, but not that many. And so there is a lot of opportunity for you, whatever you choose your path to be. And I do encourage you to, I don't want to say just network, but to get involved with communities. And not just XR Women, but to get to know people, go to events, meet people, talk to them, learn about what's going on that way. And then you can build up your knowledge and your sense of support, and don't try to fit what you want to do into somebody else's box, right? There is something you can create whatever you want. I like to say when it comes to something like XR, that the limits are not the limits of the technology, they're the limits of the imagination. And so you need to figure out what it is that you want to do and find a way to make that happen.
Let's go to the flip side. I'm a man. I'm observant. I'm paying attention to this podcast tonight. I'm not a woman, but I see it and I hear the message. What's my role?
Yeah. What is your role? Your role is to give space to women, to listen to them, to make sure that they are included in conversations. If their ideas are not heard and someone else another man expresses the same thing that a woman was just saying, speak up, say, hey, that's just what Jane said. Invite them to speak. Invite them to positions where they will have an opportunity to talk about what they know and what they can do. Give them a chance, bring them in. And it's women come from all walks of life to this industry. I mean, my background is in higher education, and I have a PhD in English literature. I don't have a technology background at all. But there's room for everyone in this industry. There are plenty of things you can do, and don't take no for an answer. Hold on to your dreams and keep pursuing them. Keep your spirit alive.
Noted, and I hope that everyone in our podcast would certainly fly with the eagle's wings with that bit of advice. Switching on. We're in a pandemic.
Ah, yes.
The plague.
The plague.
Systems change in pandemics.
Mm-hmm.
Things change, how we go about business. What are some of the changes that you've noticed in the observations for the XR industry specific?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the newfound discovered opportunities for enterprise and consumers, but more importantly, to your expertise, education?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's really interesting because in some ways, the pandemic for me helped me to deepen some relationships that I had across North America and in other countries. And that has been wonderful. Now one of my big concerns is time zones, right? How do you accommodate everyone in all the different time zones? But that ability to connect with people from around the world is hugely important. And that is a learning opportunity, right? So that's one part of the education package. But I think that, the technology was largely there, but many people didn't really discover it until we were sort of forced into it and forced to find a way. I had been very Pittsburgh focused before the pandemic. And this city is pretty big in robotics and artificial intelligence. There's Shell Games is here. One of the largest independent gaming company in the US, makes some fantastic VR games. And they're right here in Pittsburgh. Facebook Reality Labs, working on a photorealistic telepresence, is here. And we also have the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon University, from which students graduate with on a project-based curriculum, many of them choosing to work in VR or AR. So we have these strengths, but it's something that's not really noticed. And I felt like, as someone working independently, trying to create community here and trying to educate people about this technology, it was a struggle. And I felt like, I was screaming into the wilderness sometimes. And but during the pandemic, because I wasn't doing a lot of the things that I was doing in person, including these community XR events where people could come in and try out VR or AR for free. We had an event scheduled for March 14th. And of course, we shut down on the 13th. I also became ill with COVID that night myself. So that had to stop. I was working with some youth and children through community organizations and after school arts programs, that sort of thing. And that had to stop. So the sharing of the headsets was obviously something we weren't going to do for a long time, but that did force me to look outward. And then when I came back just a few weeks ago, I spoke at a tech conference here in Pittsburgh, and it was like people finally they got it. Someone said to me, well, it looks like the rest of the world is finally caught up with you. And it's like, well, Pittsburgh maybe is finally caught up to what's going on here. And I don't want to, I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit off track. I don't want to ignore your question about education and for business. Well, for business, obviously, remote training, being able to train people remotely, having people working from home, and being able to have rich interactions with them through virtual platforms, whether they are ones that like Rubella, where a headset doesn't work very well, but it does give you a sense of being in a space with other people. And there are ways that you can interact with content there with other people that makes it very productive. And of course, there are so many VR apps now that are accessible through a headset where you can do similar things. And these really do help bring people together from around the world. Again, time zones are now the new challenge, right? It's not distance, it's time. And so I think that shift, I'm not the first one to say it by any means, but that's not going away. It's only going to continue to grow. Maybe not quite as quickly as it did in the past year and a half, but it is going to continue to grow. And the same applies to education. If you look at some of the things that are being done in the Engage platform, for example, there is a digital twin of Morehouse in the Engage platform now. You can do virtual dissections as part of your education, and which is both a cost savings, but also it saves the lives of frogs and baby pigs. And also, there aren't the problems associated with having cadavers, with actual human cadavers to do dissections. And it doesn't just open up spaces for education, but also ways to really grasp things in a new way. We live in a 360 world. We live in a world with 3D objects all around us, but we are so conditioned to what has been called the tyranny of the rectangle. I heard Tony Parisi use that term a long time ago, and I really latched on to it. And because those of us of a certain age are, we look at our phones, we look at our computer screens, we look at television screens and movie screens, and even theater and dance. I did a dance project in 360 recently, and dance is typically viewed, through the proscenium arch in the theater. And we with these new technologies, we're no longer confined to that. We're no longer subject to that tyranny of the rectangle, but it's hard to grasp. We have to wrap our heads around it. So we can do things like with an app like CalcFlow. I didn't quite make it to calculus in school. I quit at trigonometry. And, in looking at an app like CalcFlow, where you have the calculus equation and you're looking at a 3D app, you can change the variables in the equation, change the type of the equation, but you can also take that graph and rotate it around and look at it from different angles. And it helped me to understand what calculus was. I will not say I understand calculus, but understanding kind of what those equations did, it really sort of hits you in a different way.
Undoubtedly, the building of devices and hardware, these looking objects, if you will, these rectangles, these squares, the intention has never been to completely stay in that position of looking at screens, but moreover to the point of getting inside them, operating, to explore. As you eloquently stated, we find ourselves in a 360 space as it is naturally. So naturally, to the extension of this reality would be a digital twin counterpart to the very ideal in reality of a 360 virtual simulated environment in which we buy, sell, trade, collaborate, and build community, whether that's the metaverse or XR specific. But I want to talk about Pittsburgh. All of us tonight that are listening, let's pretend none of us know what Pittsburgh is. I'd be remiss in not taking the opportunity to speak to the culture of Pittsburgh, but from your lens, and what influence does it have in technology?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. Well, as I mentioned before, I've only been here for 4 years, so there's a lot I don't know, but I find it quite an interesting place. One of it is its geographic location. So at Pittsburgh, you have the Allegheny River, which I could almost throw a rock at from here, and the Monongahela River coming together to form the Ohio River right downtown at the point. And you can stand there at the point and just reach down and put your hands on those waters. And it's very powerful, that these two big rivers come together to form another. I really appreciate that. It was a steel town. And of course, when the steel industry died, it suffered greatly. Huge losses in population because people fled. There were no more jobs. And just this year, for the first time, the population of Pittsburgh is starting to grow after decades. The first time it's starting to see some growth. The replacement for the steel industry were meds and eds. So the medical research that was going on through the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and the educational systems, Carnegie Mellon University, fantastic university, as is University of Pittsburgh. And there are a number of other smaller universities here. So those were some of the drivers of the economy here. But in recent years, the robotics industry has grown incredibly rapidly. A lot of that is coming out of Carnegie Mellon. The Pittsburgh Robotics Network recently added its 100th member. So there are at least 100 robotics companies here in Pittsburgh. The self-driving car industry is big here. And there's also a lot in the area of artificial intelligence. And again, some of that is coming out of Carnegie Mellon. So these are drivers for the economy of the future here. However, Carnegie Mellon is an elite institution. And when you look at places, so I recently worked on a project in which I had 3 choreographers who I introduced to 360. They learned how to choreograph, and we filmed site-specific videos. One of them was at this location, Mill 19 at Hazelwood Green, which was the site of a former steel mill. And people in the neighborhood of Hazelwood used to work in those mills, used to work there. So now you have their Catalyst Connection, which is a manufacturing extension partner. You have Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing, and also some Carnegie Mellon presence with some robotics going on there. The people in Hazelwood are not working there. And so, there are really big divides. The Strip District is called Robotics Road, just up the hill from the Strip District in the Hill District, which is an historically Black neighborhood, and one that is fairly poverty stricken. How do you get the people from there into those jobs in the robotics industry when they are not going to be going to Carnegie Mellon University for their education? And also, they are not getting in their public school education what they need to scaffold and set them up for an education at a place like Carnegie Mellon. And the people who are working, and there are some really great community-minded people in this city. People who put their heart and soul into making things better for everyone and serving the children who live here. And when I have come to community organizations offering to introduce their kids to XR in some way, to creating an XR, they want it. They know that their kids need this and that they're not getting it in their schools. And so, this is very typical of some of the divides in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's been called one of the best cities to live in America a number of times, but it's also the worst place for Black women to live. So some really major problems here. It's actually far less diverse than one might think. I was surprised after I moved here to realize that it was, this region certainly is very, very white. And that affects the culture, right?
What are those barriers? Why Black women in particular? What is Pittsburgh missing? Let's take it there.
Yeah. Decent, affordable childcare. Maybe let's start there.
Right.
The maternal mortality rate is very high here as well. But yeah, sort of, I don't know, beyond that, beyond being able to state those things, how did we get here? I can't tell you.
That's, to me, a very wise answer and well stated. It certainly is okay to say no. Audience, are you with us? Let's talk about 360.
Okay.
As someone from my experience, having experience in doing some of the very 360 direction for the NFL, having helped train the San Francisco 49ers in 360 technology with the stellar Robert Alberino, who's with the Kansas City Chiefs, who is an incredible media figure. 360 is growing. Now, when we talk about XR, there are those few that like to say that 360 isn't part of it, but I'll always argue that it certainly is in a major, significant way. But I'm looking to see, what is the future of 360? I mean, what are we doing with it? Is this more applicable now for education? Are we really venturing into storytelling? What do enterprises stand to benefit and gain for the adoption of 360 film?
Mm-hmm.
Give me what you got, Karen.
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm a fan of 360, and I also think it's a great entry point into XR. Certainly, it was my entry point. And I think that it offers something that can be delivered through things like cardboard headsets, which, and I know that there are people out there who will say that cardboard headsets or even the Oculus Go have ruined VR for people. And I completely disagree. And especially when you look at other parts of the world. So across the African continent, in India, where people have mobile phones and data is affordable, right? So how are you going to access VR content? You're going to do it with your phone, and if you have a cardboard headset, that can open up so many things, right? And the same is true here in many places here. And so I do, I get upset when these easy to use, accessible, affordable devices like the cardboard and like the Oculus Go, and I'm so sad that it was discontinued, but maybe there'll be something to replace it soon. I hope someone will come up with something. Um, so yeah, I get upset when people dismiss that. And I know from, other people working in XR, when I tell them about this project that I just did with these choreographers with 360 for dance, it's like when I say 360 video, they're like, nah, but the dancers I'm working with and the people here who are seeing these videos are like, wow, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. This is so advanced. It's a real difference. Those of us who have been in this space for a while are kind of jaded, right? And yeah, so, but 360 video allows for businesses and enterprises, it allows you to put people in your space in a much more affordable way than using a completely digitally created environment. So if you're going to introduce training, and yes, there are ways to add interactive elements to 360 to make it so that it is an interactive experience. That's a great way to get started, and it's realistic, and you can do it in 3D, right? And so, I think that rather than waiting until you can afford a very expensive, custom-built, completely digital, fully interactive VR experience, start with 3D, add the interactive elements, and give your trainees an immersive experience that will have a big impact on them and help train them effectively. Does that answer your question at all?
All the way.
Yeah.
Well stated. Karen, what's the most important thing that we should know about what you're building today?
Wow. To be honest, I am a bit scattered across different areas. My company is XR Connected, and my tagline is strategy, community, education. And as far as the strategy goes, I advise companies, educational institutions, ed tech startups, and educational institutions specifically on the adoption of XR and other businesses on XR adoption, right? And also help XR businesses with business strategy and processes. For community, as I said, I was one of the founders of XR Women. I have worked to build a community around these technologies here in Pittsburgh through the Pittsburgh chapter of the VR AR Association, of which I was co-president for a while, and then through this community XR program, which I worked on with Pittsburgh Community Television, and where we would rotate to different locations in the city, bring a bunch of headsets and 360 cameras, and open up the doors and allow people to come in and try it out for free so they could see what it was. It's kind of a digital literacy type project. And the education part is also connected back to that strategy for adoption, consulting with particularly at higher education institutions, but also I've worked to educate children and youth in creating for XR in a very basic way, opening up the door, letting it be fun for them, helping them create, but using XR tools so that they will get excited about it and want to go further. And also because I come from a higher education background, I have this sort of background in creating educational programs. So, a project I just finished, well, actually it's still in the works, is this virtual dance exchange project. And I worked with 3 choreographers, one from New York, but 2 from here in Pittsburgh, who had never done 360 before. This was a year in the making. We were having conversations every week for a long time. And I sent them all Samsung Gear 360 cameras, the 2017 models though, and taught them how to use them so that they could start practicing choreographing for 360. Right. And then in the end, the New York team, Bianca Johnson and dancers, came to Pittsburgh, and we filmed at Mill 19, which I mentioned previously. Sheena Simmons dance did a piece at an abandoned church here. And then Chrysla Brown did a performance in a park with a bunch of murals around it. And so these were the three dances, and we released these just last week, just on Friday. We had a little launch event at Pittsburgh Community Television, which was a lot of fun. And then we had these series of public dialogue. So on Tuesday, we had Audrey Russo, the president of the Pittsburgh Tech Council, Celeste Smith, who is the head of arts and culture funding for the Pittsburgh Foundation, and also one of the founders of One Hood Media. Erin Perry, who runs the Legacy Arts Project, and Randall Miller, who works for the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust and is the head of the Dance Council. So we had brought them together to start exchanging ideas about the relationship between art and technology in Pittsburgh, about art and equity in Pittsburgh, art, tech, and equity in Pittsburgh, which will actually be the more specific focus of our next dialogue on October 26th. On November 16th, we will have some people who are working in very experimental ways and doing new things in immersive performance, including Jae-hee Cho, who is a graduate of the Entertainment Technology Center at CMU and who was our videographer for the Virtual Dance Exchange project. Lee Erdman, who is a dancer who did her master's thesis on dance in 360. She is from Canada, and she is now performing with Welcome to Respite, the Severance Theory, with that group on their really innovative live VR theater performances, and with Lauren Ruffin from Crux. One more person, Kate Fisher, will be there. But we're starting these dialogues, trying to bring people together and to start some exchanges, to start to address these issues. And part of that is sort of an underlying theme of the first one was, okay, the economy in Pittsburgh is no longer based on steel, and steel money did put a lot into the arts. We've got a fabulous Carnegie Museum of Art and History and a lot of other things that came from steel money. But now that money is going to be coming from robotics and from artificial intelligence, are those companies funding the arts? They need to have a rich culture here in order to attract employees here. So they should be invested in the arts, and we want to start establishing those relationships. So my company's called XR Connected. I think of myself as a connector in many ways. And so maybe that's the most important thing to know about what I'm doing right now.
What's the best way for people to find you, Karen?
Probably LinkedIn. That's the social media platform I'm most comfortable on. And I'm there as Karen F. Alexander, F as in Frank. I'm also on Twitter at XR Connected. Every now and then on Instagram at XR Connected. But I prefer LinkedIn, and oddly, maybe it's because I know you, I feel like this is much more of a personal conversation, but I like LinkedIn because I can put up that professional persona and interact there. That's easier for me.
Indeed. We have one final question for you tonight. What inspires you to do all that you do?
Well, I think that I am inspired by human creativity and ingenuity and what people are capable of and how they can create new things. And that inspires me. And I love to learn. I love to learn new things. And that's part of why I like being in this industry, because there are always new things to learn. And I like meeting people who are trying to use their creativity and ingenuity to build new things of whatever sort, whether it's a tool, a machine, or a work of art.
Everyone, you've heard it here from the Christopher Lafayette podcast show. The enthusiastic, the detailed, the force multiplier, the great connector of XR, Karen Alexander. Karen, thank you for joining the Christopher Lafayette podcast show.
Thank you, Christopher. It was my pleasure.
We're looking forward to having you back again someday to update us on that old steel town of Pittsburgh and the wonderful and the future prospects in its hub. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us. We're hoping that you keep safe and well, and we look forward to trekking with you again. Good night.